Good afternoon. We're going to call the meeting of the Justice and Public Safety Committee to order. Second item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. Commissioners, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Item number 3 is adoption of the agenda. Is there a motion? Moved by Carabelli, supported by Drolet. Any discussion on the agenda? Please vote on your iPads. The agenda is unanimously adopted. Item number 4 is the approval of the minutes from the committee meeting on April 19th, 2018. Is there a motion? Moved by Drolet, supported by Lucido. Any discussion on the minutes? Please vote on your iPad. Item number 5 is public participation. Any members of the public wish to address the committee? Seeing no members of the public, will close public participation and move to item number 6, which is presentation. I understand that Prosecutor Derek Miller is scheduled to be here, so we'll pass until he arrives. Item number 7 is the department recommendations from the Sheriff's Department. It's a budget amendment to the Capital Improvement Fund for the jail bed replacement, and we have Captain Walter Zimney here to discuss that. Captain?
Good afternoon, Board. I'm here to discuss the jail bed replacement project that was initially brought in front of the Board a month ago. Since then, we've had some communication with Commissioner Carabelli, who identified a fabricator who had a better solution for our bed project. And with that, I brought a demo of the fabrication and also a proposal for this type of remedy for the jail bed project. This fabrication is much more simpler. It could be fixed to the bunk within minutes. There is a cost savings of $295,000 to go with this process opposed to the jail bunk replacement piece. The remedy for this would only take weeks opposed to over a year for the other process, including wear and tear of the jail itself and staff constraints trying to replace every bunk in the jail. This has been shown to Ron Syme from Wakely. He's in agreement that this would be an adequate fix. The sheriff is in agreement that he would approve this as well. It has a 30-year warranty from the vendor, and it's a sole source engineered product. So there is a change, and that's what I'm here to address in front of the Board.
So does that piece just fit over the top?
No, it's like a cap. It's like a huge rivet. This is just a demo. They use this plate steel to replicate the actual thickness of the bunk. So then they use that and then they apply the fix to it. So in essence, it's a stainless steel rivet with a security screw and Loctite that's affixed with a special tool. And it's locked in from the bottom, and it's a smooth surface with less than 3/16 of a rise, so it won't be disruptive to the inmates nor the mattresses that's going to rest on this. And it's a permanent fix that's warranted for 30 years.
And that covers up the piece that the inmates were using to?
No. All the bunks have a hole in it, similar to this. So we're filling this void with this product.
Okay, so you're just putting the cap over the top of the hole?
Well, it's like a two-piece.
Okay.
Top and bottom. And it's
Okay.
affixed from the bottom up.
Okay.
And the only way this can be removed after it's Loctited, it would have to be drilled out. Even with the tool that's used the specialized tool to tighten this product, you would not be able to remove it without drilling it out. I have the sole source specs on this that was provided by KTEC. I have copies for all the commissioners if you wish to review it. Again, the cornerstone bid was $887,000, I believe. and this bid is $595,000, savings of $295,000 and some change.
Okay,
This product could be immediately produced in mass quantities because you need over 9,000 of them, and it could resolve our issue within 30 days for liability.
okay, I have several speakers on the list. Chair Smith?
Thank you. Thanks for bringing that to us, and Mr. Carabelli, thanks for looking into this. That's nice savings. So you're not coming to us right now, obviously, but that'll be maybe the next meeting, next group meetings you're going to come to
Correct,
us for this
whatever
approval?
process, because I saw this on the agenda, and it dealt with Cornerstone, and I wanted to make sure I appeared before the boards to let them know that there is a remedy to it that we feel is adequate and, you know, at a substantial cost savings, obviously.
And another thing that I know we talked about, and I don't know how it actually got resolved, but at one point we were saying, why do we have to do the bottom bunks? It's kind of tough to hang yourself, you know, so to speak, and that's what the concern of this is, I believe, right? From the bottom bunk. And I don't know if that's something legally that we talk about with our corporation council, or if that's something that's just been an overall recommendation throughout countrywide, that's what we have to do. But I mean, you get my questioning. That's a kind of an interesting.
Sure. Board Chair, I agree that, you know, there's minimum space between the bottom bunk and the floor, but I think Corporation Council would support this, that it only takes a matter of a few inches to apply the necessary pressure to your neck if you have some kind of object that's tied around it. You don't need a substantial distance. With your intent to lean forward and apply pressure, all you gotta do is have that enough to hold that person up. So yes, the bottom bunk is minimally mounted to the floor. I mean, it's probably 18 inches, but I think that at that distance, it's enough to pose a threat. And at this savings, why would we ever not consider doing that to eliminate any further liability?
And that's my concern, obviously, is the liability and the safety, but I just didn't know if Corporation Council has had a say on it, if they've really looked into it, or if it's more of a, hey, we just cover our butt at all costs, even though it does seem kind of funny, but no one probably has done this off the bottom bunk in the whole history of our time, but they might find a way, right? I guess that's what we're saying.
I don't know of a case here in Macomb where someone has hung themselves from the bottom bunk, but when I worked for the city, we had 3 hangings in different lockups, precinct lockups, where people literally hung themselves while sitting on the floor. They tied off to the horizontal bar spreader, which was about 20 inches above the floor, tied off to that, noosed up, and simply leaned forward and hung themselves and died. The mechanics of the death is not always asphyxiation, you know, crushing the airway and dying of lack of oxygen. The carotid, I learned this from a lawsuit, carotid arteries in your neck, the front of your neck, will collapse with as little as 4 rope pounds of pressure, which is as much pressure as 4 pounds suspended on a rope over your throat would exert. That's very little, and that'll cut off the oxygen to the brain and kill you that way too.
Okay, thanks.
My very strong recommendation is we do tops and bottoms.
That's fine. I just wanted to make sure that we were at least looking at it just like we looked at this project, and we didn't just say, well, this is what we've got. I just want to make sure that we've talked to everybody about it, and I appreciate that feedback.
Sure.
And appreciate you guys, you know, being willing to take a second look at things and consider alternatives that.
Well, I really think the kudos goes to Commissioner Carabelli. I mean, he's the one who took the
I agree.
initiative to move forward on this and provide a possible resolution to this. And through his diligence and teamwork, I think we came up with a much more economical version of a fix to resolve our issue and to address it quickly.
And a much more expedient remedy to
Absolutely.
it also. So thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, commendations to Commissioner Carabelli. I guess you've earned your salary if we think about the savings 8 times over, so good savings to the county. I do have one question. These rivets, I guess, that
Yes.
Who is going to stamp those out? Do we have somebody? Are you looking into that right now? Or
Well, it's this company.
it's this company? And
Correct.
is that, what's the company,
It's
Cornerstone?
called K-Tech.
K-Tech.
K-Tech is a local vendor here in Clinton Township.
Okay.
And they do a lot of automotive fabrication. They also do some aerospace fabrication. And when they were presented this situation, they looked at that and they said that they've had similar fix or retrofits for military use and aerospace use. When they looked at it, they didn't think it would be that big of a problem, and certainly it wasn't. They came back within a few weeks and had a resolution to it.
Is there any been, it's a great savings, has there been any look at any other companies that do similar type of thing at all?
This
Or
was custom. This was a
custom deal? Okay.
custom. This was engineered by them. This is not on the market kind of fixation.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you. Thanks again.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I see in my paperwork the number for the original bid from Cornerstone, which was $887,000. Is that correct? And I don't see any paperwork in here for this solution. Maybe I'm missing it, or is it not in here?
I just received this yesterday.
Oh, I see. Okay, so what is the amount that that company could do it again for? Was it
$595,000
$595,000?
and
Okay.
some change.
And how many holes are there that we're filling
I
ultimately?
think 9,600.
9,600.
Something to that effect. Don't quote me,
Oops.
please. I'd have to look it up real quick.
Sorry about that. Can I get that real quick? Okay, thank you very much, and again, kudos to Commissioner Carabelli for coming up with a way we can save a lot of money. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Carabelli?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the, everybody give me kudos. It wasn't me, it was working with Lynn, the sheriff's office, and some local vendors here. So I'd like to take all the credit, but I didn't do any work other than ask people to look at something. So I appreciate it, but it was a whole, everybody working together, and good things can happen when everybody does work together. So with that said, you kind of answered the question, I'm guessing, at Corporation Council's here. Being that this is not obviously a problem germane just to Macomb County, boy, I'd like to, in that contract, have the intellectual property and get a patent on this, and maybe we can, you know, make a few more dollars on behalf of the county. Exactly. All right, thank you.
Commissioner Sauger?
I just want to let all the commissioners know, if a prisoner, whatever we do in that jail, if they want to hurt themselves, they're going to find a way. They can take a doorknob, I don't care what it is. They want to hurt themselves, they're going to do it. This is a great idea, it's been long in coming, but just remember, they'll hurt themselves when they want. Thank you.
Commissioner Myjack?
Yeah, so Madam Chair, we're looking for just a receive and file on this item, department recommendations, and then the official contract will be for next month, is that correct?
That's correct. Just for clarification, so everybody understands, this matter was not put on this agenda, it was put on a different agenda. I put it back on our agenda because it was tabled without a date, and I didn't want it just floating out there. It was by coincidence that the resolution was reached recently, and the captain brought it to us today.
Okay.
So the item is just for a receive and file
Receive and
today.
file, and then next month, we'll go through all the main motions to get this going.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Is there a motion to receive and file? Moved by Carabelli, supported by Kraft. Please vote on your iPads. Thank you. We'll go back up to item number 6, which is the presentation of program updates. Derek Miller?
Hello, Derek Miller, Chief of Operations for the Macomb County Prosecutor's Office. Thanks for giving me an opportunity to speak today. Not sure which program exactly you'd like me to discuss. However, just give you a rundown of our office from a standpoint of positions in the office. We have 60, we employ here in the Macomb County Prosecutor's Office 60 assistant prosecuting attorneys. We have 40 support staff, 8 investigators, and 8 victim advocates. We have to staff prosecutors for 14 circuit court judges. That's 10 criminal circuit court judges, as well as 14 family and civil units. We have, Madam Chair, as you know, 10 district courts in Macomb County that we also have to send prosecutors to out, ranging from all the way south as East Point and Warren to Romeo District Court and New Haven and New Baltimore, covering Chesterfield. So we have a large county, third largest out of 83 counties in the state of Michigan, third largest county when it comes to population size. I believe third or fourth busiest in the county when it comes to cases involving prosecutions. Considering we have such a large border with Wayne County, which is the busiest circuit court in the county. We have tremendous responsibilities here that Eric Smith, my boss, does not take lightly. Currently, we have seen such an uptick. I became chief of operations of the prosecutor's office in early February, and we've seen since February 14th with Parkland school shooting down in Florida, we've seen such an uptick in false threats of terrorism. I believe we've authorized over 65 cases involving false threat of terrorism or false threat of bomb use, whether that be the vast majority of those are juvenile cases, cases of individuals who are under the age of 17 years old, but there are certainly adult cases, one of which I authorized today out of Clinton Township at Chippewa Valley High School. We have a strict policy in our office with Eric's viewpoint is the fact that we cannot take any of these cases lightly. Unfortunately, a lot of these cases that we see are just individuals suffering from either a mental health illness or some form of bullying within the school. And we feel that with good public awareness and with using and partnering with our officer liaisons that we're fortunate to have inside the schools, that education and assistance and counseling can really be preventative measures in these types of cases. But some of the units in our office, just to give you a breakdown of that, we have a domestic violence unit. Domestic violence is such a it's such a difficult crime to prosecute. It deals with so many issues, substance abuse issues, aggression issues, and can escalate so quickly. And so many of the violent situations that are men and women in law enforcement in Macomb County that deal with the scariest situations for them are often dealing with domestic violence cases, going to cases where the homeowners or occupants of that home are intoxicated of some sort. It's past midnight, 2 a.m. in the morning. You don't know if those individuals, there's reports of people having guns in those homes, and they can certainly escalate quickly. But we have a domestic violence unit. We have a child protection unit that deals with all of the sexual abuse cases involving children under the age of 16 in our county. Unfortunately, that number is way too high with how many cases we deal with in that unit. We have a drug unit, an appellate division, a warrant division, a consumer fraud division that deals with check frauds and other types of financial and monetary schemes that go on in the county. We have an auto theft unit within the prosecutor's office. Really just cover the gamut in all kinds of areas in our office, and it's an extremely busy office to be part of, but I take great pride in that. So if you guys have any questions, I'd be happy to field any of those right now. We roughly manage 15,000 files a year out of Macomb County alone. So, we deal with we have an extradition unit that deals a lot with handling prisoners or felons that are out on parole or parole violators that need to be extradited back to other states across the country, and dealing with other states involving extradition. So we have a division within our warrant section that handles that as well. So when you're dealing with 15,000 criminal cases a year, it's a large task. But
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Derek. Thanks for coming up and talking to us. I know that just for everybody's information, we had a little bit of a light agenda today, and I know there's been a lot going on with the terrorist threat thing, and I know everybody gets a little piece of it in the paper, but I don't think any one of us really realize the amount of things that are going on like that in the county like this. So we asked if they wouldn't mind coming up, giving us a little update on some of their programs and just a general overview of their office. Derek, I know that in the past you guys have had other initiatives, and just wondering, do they continue on over the years to the the prom end of the season, sending out the letters and doing things like with drinking and driving, just reminders, basically. I know you guys have done a lot of great programs like that, and with other sexual CSC type stuff with when you get into high schools with senior, sophomore type stuff. I know you guys have had a lot of different programs. Do you guys keep those rolling too, and it's just kind of up to the schools to put them out?
Yeah, well, when Eric wrote a letter to and sent it out, we sent it out to all superintendents of each school district, and it was up to their discretion as to whether they wanted to distribute. Fortunately, many of them did. We had, we thought great success with that message being put out there. A lot of prosecutors reached out to Eric to actually implement the same type of correspondence in their own counties, respective counties. But yeah, we have one of the most successful programs that we've had throughout my tenure in the prosecutor's office, dating back to 2010, and Eric implemented when he became prosecutor, was going to senior homes in different communities and with our senior crimes unit and doing a crime prevention and meeting with seniors and talking to them about how to avoid scams, what tips to look for. We invite somebody from the Attorney General's office, somebody from Bill Schuete's office has came with us to those types of events, and we give presentations so that these older folks in our community, and we do have a large percentage of our community are senior citizens, so it's critical that we implement that, and that's another program that we've done. And we have another letter going out to students on an array of issues, including drinking and driving and things of that nature in the graduation season coming up. So very busy time of year, but hopefully with graduation and the end of with summer coming and kids not being in school, we will see a dramatic decline in these school threats and terrorism threats and hopefully over the summer, cooler heads will prevail and people will come back with a clean slate. So
Thank you.
yep.
Commissioner Leonetti?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Derek, good to see you. Congratulations on the new position.
Thanks.
What about the opiate crisis? What about heroin? What's going on in terms of trying to? It's a tough battle because on the one hand, you're going to prosecute people who use, obviously for possession, but that doesn't really seem to solve the problem. What's going on in terms of trying to stop the flow of heroin from coming in, or even going maybe after doctors who overprescribe, the opiates?
Well, we usually leave that up to, our folks in the, individual law enforcement agencies to do those investigations. Eric has been super supportive of community action programs like FAN and supportive of, I was the actual liaison from our office for a while for Warren's District Court, Drug Court, and they take on felony cases there. They were on Dateline before with trying to put people, giving people rehabilitation options besides putting them in jail. And there's the Circuit Court has a drug court. Roseville and Sobriety has Roseville District Court has a sobriety court. Warren does. I believe Shelby Township has begun to now have one as well, and we think that can be really helpful with that sort of thing. It's interesting. You see the push now to get marijuana on the ballot, to legalize marijuana, and marijuana used to be considered such a dangerous drug, which certainly it can still be, but now with the whole opiate addiction and the opiate crisis, where you just see so many of our young people and older people becoming addicted to Vicodin, oxycodone, and leading to heroin laced with fentanyl, that that's really what we're trying to deal with. And certainly, we're open to all options, but we have to rely on, the feds as well as, special ops investigators with, the Sheriff's Department, Warren, and that sort of thing to bring us the warrants. And Eric Smith is more than willing to do anything he can to help prevent that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Hi, Derek. How are you doing?
Good, Commissioner. Thank you.
Getting back to the school threats, I've seen our prosecutor on TV telling kids, don't do this because you're going to pay the penalty. You mentioned something about you send home literature to the houses. Do they ever do these at General Assembly so that the kids actually know once it seems like, is there any records kept of once the General Assembly is met and the liaison officer comes up there and says, you guys do this, you're going to pay the price. Don't fool. And then how soon after that do we get a threat out of that particular school? I guess my first question is, do they do this at General Assembly to the kids, not letters, not programs? Do they do it at a General Assembly so that people know exactly what's going to happen to them?
Yeah, and they do. Eric Smith took part in one, and with a panel of folks from the city of Warren and the U.S. Attorney, I believe, was there as well in Warren with the Van Dyke school districts. But it really relies on the leadership of the school board and the individual principals and superintendents to take the initiative to call our office. You know, we're always open to those ideas, and we think General Assemblies and those things, putting those panels together, letting students ask questions, becoming informative as to how the criminal justice system works, the dangers of making threats, what kind of statement qualifies as a terrorist threat, what kind of statement is just a school bully threat, those sort of things. And we do see, you know, when those assemblies happen and the education level rises, that people, you know, tend to not make those statements, and if they were considering going that way due to personal problems or issues, you know, reaching out to either parents or counselors within the school. But we think that it needs to happen more, but that's not really our call.
I understand. I guess I've always felt that face-to-face confrontation, in the case of a General Assembly, where somebody from the office, your office, or maybe the local police departments, if you make tags with them, and standing up there in front of all these students in the General Assembly, and they realize that this guy up there has the authority to put them in jail, he starts screwing around. And other than, again, like you said, the stuff meeting with Warren and the school board, get to the kids, get in front of them, get your face in front of them and let them know, you mess around, you're going to jail, you're not going to do this. And I think it's so much more effective than a letter or sending stuff home to the parents or having a counselor talk. It's just my personal opinion. Thank you, Derek. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Commissioner Kleinfeld?
Thank you, Chair. Teenagers are stupid, a lot of them. I know because I was particularly stupid when I was a teenager. I look back at some of the stuff that I've done, and quite frankly, it's amazing I'm still alive. But we know this. We know it from our own kids. I have a kid that tied a string around a stop sign, ran across the street, tied it around another stop sign at 3 o'clock in the morning, and the only car that came along was a police officer. He threw her in the back of the car. So, and I had a case on school board. This no tolerance concerns me, and I know it's your philosophy. I just want to put my 2 cents in. We had a case where a kid dared another kid to go into the bathroom with chalk and draw a picture of a bomb right after Columbine. And we had a no tolerance, and she was expelled for 180 days. And back then, schools didn't take other schools' expelled children, and we basically created a dropout. What I don't want to do is, when we say zero tolerance, we lose the ability to look at each case individually. We know when we have a case where a kid is joking around or they did something stupid. And what I don't want to do, because when I'm reading these newspaper articles, I'm like, I hope we're not hanging felonies on 50 kids and 100 kids and 200 kids by the end of the year, because if we do, we make them unemployable. And if we make them unemployable, then we're going to have big problems with them in the future. I want to put those kids to work. I want to make them suffer, but I don't want to hang them with felonies. You understand what I'm saying? That's been weighing heavy on me as I'm reading these articles, because I know that even you guys have admitted the vast majority of them weren't actually a threat to society. And it's kind of like we don't want to convict 100 people that of maybe they'll murder somebody because one actually will. So I just wanted to throw that out there. I'm watching this, and I'm thinking we have to let ourselves look at them on an individual basis. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think that's a valid concern. I think first and foremost, we have to realize that Eric Smith states that there's a no tolerance, and I think what it means is is that, you know, we have a constitutional responsibility to look at the facts of the case. Each charge has criminal elements, and we have to prove that there's probable cause, which is our threshold for signing that warrant to believe that those elements of each crime have been met before we actually charge that crime. If we don't believe that that threat was credible, or we don't think that that person rose to the level of meeting those criminal elements, then we won't charge. And that's just that's the facts. Now, on the ones that we do charge, I think it's also important to realize that the cases are in juvenile cases, which is juvenile convictions of somebody who's under the age of 17 is a civil adjudication of a criminal matter. So it's not a criminal conviction. So if you're 16 years old and you're convicted of false threat of terrorism, you are, when you get a job later in life, and they ask you, have you ever been convicted of a felony or a misdemeanor, you can truthfully say no, because it's not a criminal adjudication. It's not a criminal conviction. Now, those that people have, and there's provision in juvenile court that allows you to take responsibility but not go on your record even for a civil adjudication. If they're over 17 years old, there's a provision in the law which is called the Holmes Youthful Trainee Act, which was named after Senator Holmes, who was the sponsor of the bill at the time, which allows for folks between the ages of 17 and 21, and then 21 to 24, with prosecutorial approval, to plead guilty under the crime in front of the court and do a term of probation. And if they're successful under probation with the counseling that the judge administers, then the crime completely gets dismissed from their record, and it's not a public record. It doesn't even go on the record from the beginning until that conviction, until he violates probation and the judge violates his HIDA status. But if he's successful, that crime as well will never be seen or for public record. So although we're holding their feet to the fire, although we're making them responsible for what they did, because we believe that even though you don't want to see your child or somebody you know who made a stupid mistake get in trouble, those other 99.9% of parents who send their kids to school have a right to have their kids come home safely at the end of the day. And they don't need to be in threat that their kid's going to be murdered at their school, where it's supposed to be a safe environment. So although we're holding their feet to the fire and holding them responsible, if they meet that constitutional burden of probable cause on the elements of the crime, there's ways out, there's ways. It's not the end of the road for them. And I think that's something that a lot of the public doesn't know when a crime comes forward.
I'm sorry, just two more things, and I agree with you. I think probably maybe it's a legislative issue. The crime is a false threat of terrorism. So so it's easy to prove a false threat, because it's not even a real threat. It's just a kid says something, you know. So that's what but my second part of that is, and I just pulled it up because I've looked up the word terrorism 100 times in the last 6 months for different reasons. And it says the unlawful use of...
Hope those were all lawful reasons.
I don't want to scare you, yes. We've had debates in our household about that word.
Maybe we should advise you have a right to counsel.
It's the unlawful use of violence and intimidation, especially against civilians, in the pursuit of political aims. And I've looked up several different versions of the word terrorism, and every single one says usually to achieve a political goal, or to achieve a goal associated with a political organized group or something of that nature. So I'm a little bit surprised that some of these cases that are, a kid says something, you know, that it's a false threat of terrorism.
Yeah, the threat has to be threaten somebody's livelihood, and the other element, one of the other elements is the fact that it's a government institute or some institute of function of the government that is meant to disrupt that environment. one of the debate, we just went over this morning with the case that we had, because the student made a direct threat to the teacher of that school, and being the fact that it's stated that they're going to kill this teacher, and being the fact that it is a public school, it is a teacher, I raised the question, well, what if they're at DLSL and they say that to a teacher there, and it's a private institution and not a form of, an institute of the government? So that is something that could be addressed legislatively, but, yeah, I don't know. That's the best I can answer.
All right, thank you, Chair.
Commissioner Sauger.
Yeah, Derek, could you explain how they do the extraditions? I did that for many years over at the Sheriff's Department, so I know all about them, but I wonder how they do them now. How are extraditions handled?
Same way they were handled when you were there?
I had heard.
Unfortunately, it's a
Wait.
slow-moving process and nothing dramatic.
Oh, then
has
we were faster then, okay.
Nothing dramatic has changed, yes. No, we have to get they have a right to
I know what they
challenge
have to get.
their
I want to buy, you don't have to go into a whole detail, but there was a company that was trying to get a contract just as I was retiring to pick up all the cases, all the extraditions. They'd go out for all the counties and pick them up in an airplane. They were trying to do that. And I don't know how far they got with it. Have you heard anything? Okay. Then it's the same way it's been?
Yeah, and they just throw them out the window in a parachute?
Yeah. No, there was many questions asked.
No, I don't know anything about that. No, so we just get most people facing extradition to another state that has charges pending in another state has a right to challenge that extradition.
Yeah.
It's a low burden it's not beyond a reasonable doubt for that. It's a low burden of proof for that to us, but most of them, because they want to get the process moving along and don't want to sit behind bars, waive their right to challenge their extradition. So that's how most of them goes. I've never heard of any type of bonding company or anything of that nature.
Well, this was a few years ago, but I know they were pressing for it. We used to go, I don't want to get into details on it, but I'm glad they're not doing that. Thank you.
Yep.
Any other speakers on the first round? Chair Smith on the second.
Thanks. Just briefly, Derek, you mentioned that it's done the same way as when Marv was around, and I didn't realize we were still running a stagecoach for this situation like that. Sorry,
yeah.
Sorry, Marv.
That's the way he was delivered when he was a little kid, because I knew his mom and dad real well. Yeah.
All right. So first, I'd like to say thanks for explaining that to everybody, because I think it does take on a little bit different meaning when you say zero tolerance, but then you say it's zero tolerance within the rules of law. Not everybody even gets to that point of the criminal elements, and also explaining all the different programs that are available for these kids not to be ruined for life for a dumb mistake, but to be held accountable, to realize that, dumb mistakes are, sometimes they're just dumb, but sometimes they're seriously dumb. And then last I want to point out, and I'm sure Commissioner Romano heard it, but it just got a little convoluted, that I'm sure you guys would rather speak to assemblies, but it's not your call. And you guys make the request of the schools, but you can't say, we're coming to speak to an assembly, let's be there. So your only choice is to talk to them, send them letters that hopefully they'll do it, and make yourselves available for that. So I just wanted to kind of clear that up. And I know that I know that you know that, but it seemed like it got a little convoluted. But I know that is probably, it seems like that's your first choice at any
Sure.
cost. So thanks for coming up.
Yeah, and I would just like to, anytime anybody wants to see our operations or go to, see our warrant division, what we deal with every day, the stack of, how we analyze a warrant. If you want to come meet with our chief of warrants to go over something like that, please feel free to do so.
Thank you. Seeing no other speakers, is there a motion to receive and file? Moved by Lucido, supported by Romano. Please vote on your iPad. Thank you, Derek.
Have a good day. Thank you very much.
That concludes my portion of the agenda. Commissioner Majek?
Thank you, Commissioner Toko. Go on to government operations. First item on the agenda here, item number 8A is Macomb County Arts Authority. It's a board chair appointment. reappointment of Ed Bruley for a 3-year term, 2018 to 2021. If you want to come up here to the podium, Ed, just tell us a little bit about yourself, why you want to continue to reapply and serve, any issues on the Arts Authority that you are dealing with. And it was interesting, your application here, you talked about steering a lot of young people through our halls of the DIA, and I know your work with MSEP, the Macomb Cultural Exchange Program, you bring a lot of students there somewhere, if you can talk about those things.
Well, thank you. Thank you, and good afternoon to those who I know, and hello to those I don't. I appreciate the chair considering my appointment again. I've served on the board for the last 3 years. I've only missed one meeting, so I do attend them regularly, and I do involve myself in the proceedings. I was involved when this millage first came up, when I was a member of the board for 4 years, and have followed that process through. My first time being appointed was under Dave Flynn, and what our main responsibility is to make sure that the millage money is legally transferred. But within those guidelines, what we also do is to make sure that the contract that we have with the DIA is fully implemented. And that involves school kids going to the DIA. It involves school groups going to the DIA. So we, during our 3 meetings a year, watch the process and get numerical information back to make sure, in fact, that the fulfillment of the contract is happening. And I'm happy to say that it is, and that it has increased, our participation has increased over the number of years. So I think that have a good relationship with the DIA. Generally, I'd like to serve again because I think that the DIA is making efforts to try and extend itself into the greater community. And I think it's trying to diversify and bring in a new audience. I think it's harder for them than, say, the zoo, which I think has a much different kind of base to begin with. I think art of all different kinds is not as infused in our school curriculum. I also happen to sit on the school board in Mount Clemens, and the first thing that goes in schools is art, and I think that's a real problem. I think there are a certain group of kids that don't necessarily stand out when it comes to chemistry or other kinds of subjects like that could benefit greatly from seeing that there are ways to make a good living in the world, to have a good occupation, and to use the creative energy that they have in a positive way. And the Art Institute is trying to develop those kinds of programs, understanding that they're a pretty small staff organization themselves, and they're trying to meet a greater challenge now that they have funding from the 3-county area. So I'd be happy to answer any questions of anybody that would have one.
Thank you. First on the list, Commissioner Drollet.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good to see you, Commissioner Bruley. I apologize to my colleagues because I brought up some of these concerns to Salvatore and David and so forth. But one of the concerns I've had is that attendance to the DIA from Macomb County has dropped pretty steadily since the approval of the millage, with the exception of this most recent year. And the increase from the most recent year is almost entirely accounted for from students being bussed in. So my concern is that we're maybe not doing as much as we could to appeal to a broader array of residents from Macomb County. That some reason they don't feel the value, and in just some anecdotal discussions I've had with folks, is the concern that once you've gone to see that DIA, you've seen the DIA. Mm-hmm. There's no point in going back the next year or the next year. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering if there's anything that you can do on this particular authority to expand the amount of special exhibits that our residents are allowed to attend for free, given that we're currently paying about $112 per attendee when you divide the millage amount that's sent in by the number of Macomb attendees. For $112 per person, maybe you should get to go see the special exhibit.
I think that they're having, number one, exhibits cost money. So I think
we're paying $112 per person.
I understand, but part of the, if you're going to have a special exhibit, you have to, that's going to be a budgeted item that doesn't come in just taking care of what we have as a permanent collection. But they are attempting, and I think this year's presentation, of using baseball cards and seeing that in an artistic way, and also the Star Wars presentation, looking at it through the costumes that they use, gives there again kids the idea, and I think kids are the key. I don't think in our schools we have the art teachers that say a lot of schools in another county may. I think part of the problem is the interpretive value. In other words, if you have a kid and you've never exposed a kid to this, which I think a lot of our students aren't initially exposed, and you compare us, say, to a different county that has greater attendance, it's because during their school life, those students were exposed more. So one of the prime features that we've tried to do is get greater attendance by our students, not just in a certain school district, but in all school districts. So we push them very hard to make sure kids from Fitzgerald, make sure kids from Fraser, make sure kids from Roseville, make sure kids from East Point have those kinds of experiences on par with schools from other parts of the region. I think that initial exposure is what's going to draw attendance later in life. If you go to a baseball game and you go for the first time in your life when you're 30 or 40, you're going to have a different understanding than if you played baseball since you were 10. You're going to understand baseball, you're going to see it, you're going to know the rules, you're going to know what makes a good play. You're going to create that inherent ability to understand.
My concern,
And I
Mr.
think what the DIA is doing is trying to do that.
Right. My concern, Mr. Burley, is not whether or not we have enough young people going to the museum, but whether or not we are getting the biggest bang for our taxpayers' dollars, and whether we could actually attract more folks if we could allow them to come to the special exhibits. I don't know, for example, is the Star Wars exhibit a special exhibit that costs additionally to attend?
Yeah, it's pretty minor cost.
Okay.
It's not a,
So
it's
how many
not a major,
credits,
it's not a prohibitive cost. But I don't disagree with you.
Yeah,
I mean, I think if we had those things, and I'll certainly voice that, I think that it should be free. I mean, for everybody in the 3-county area.
Right. Well, it's we're paying a lot of money.
Yep.
In that the DIA has benefited from. We'd hope that our residents get the best value possible out of those tax dollars.
Yeah.
So I would just encourage you to continue to work toward that end of making as many of the exhibits for those that are.
And I would agree with you.
Okay. And if I may continue, Mr. Chair, just with one other
Sure.
with one other thought that I just lost.
We'll
I'll come back to
You'll
it.
come back.
I'll
Okay.
defer. Thank you.
Next on the list, Chair Smith.
Thanks, Ed. I just want to say that I have talked with a bunch of people about your appointment and your work that you've done down at the DIA, and from the very highest level down at the DIA to even people in the executive's office and all in between. They've said that you've been a great asset to their board and all the things that you've done for them. So I want to say I appreciate that. I think you guys have been doing a great job of exactly what Commissioner Drolet's talking about, trying to increase attendance by doing the things that they never did before, things that would encourage engagement out here, bringing the DIA Away program and, instituting programs like the baseball card and the Star Wars costume thing. And I'm sure that that's just the tip of the iceberg on what you guys are thinking in the future. All these things don't happen overnight. But I like to see where you guys are going, and I'm happy to have a guy like Salvador running this place that has the ability to see a bigger picture than I would think maybe a lot of people in his position would.
Yep.
So that being said, I just want to say that we appreciate the work you've done and the work that it looks like you're doing, and I agree with your baseball analogy, because when you learn it from a young age and you understand art, you want to go see it because you realize that it's not the same thing every time. When you go down and you really don't know what you're talking about, just like, say, my wife watching baseball now as opposed to me. She's like, this is boring, I don't understand it, but I love it because I understand it all. You go down to the DIA enough when you're young and you understand the different forms of art and where they came from and what what the importance of them are, and it makes it a different experience down there. So I agree with your initiative to infuse this into the young people. I think that is the future for the DIA. So thanks again.
Thank you.
Commissioner Lucido?
Hi, thank you. I've also heard very great things about your work and appreciate it. And as a teacher, I certainly appreciate your enthusiasm for making sure young kids are exposed to it. Last Friday, Mike Keys, who's our Clinton Township trustee, and he works with us, he and I went down to the DIA. Mike is doing a fun new program for cable in the car with Keys, right? So we went down and we did some interviews with some of the people down there working, and I think the biggest thing that needs to take place is getting it out to teachers, because even though sometimes the superintendents know about it and other people, it's the teachers that are going to have the motivation to get their classes down there. And it's true what you said, start them at a young age and expose it, but also knowing that even though you're going down, their exhibits are changing, but also they have the wonderful programs where they make the art with the kids and they take it home and it's free. I was just amazed at some of the things that they had down there that the kids had created, and for the summer, parents, doing it, or Parks and Recreation programs, libraries having it. There's so much for people to do down there, and I just think they don't know.
Yep.
So I'm hoping his cable show will expose it to some people, and just getting the word out there, because I think if people really realized it, I'm hoping they would take advantage of it.
Thank you.
So, and thank you for all your hard work.
Thank you.
I see no other speakers except for Commissioner Drolak. Go ahead.
Thank you.
I sat next to Leon for a couple of years. So
you used to be forgetting things.
I remember when we forget or remember both at the same time. So.
Right. So Edwin Salvatore was here the other day. First off, I think a lot of us here, and certainly me, appreciated the fact that he and David and perhaps many others, maybe including you, have been really trying to reimagine how to connect with people in a broader way in recognizing the role art plays and so forth. At the same time, I recognize that brilliant ideas like the Star Wars exhibit or the baseball card exhibit or other things are hard for any individual person to continually come up with. So I had questioned whether or not it would be worth doing a survey of Macomb residents, maybe other counties as well, but specifically Macomb, to get an idea of their thoughts on what type of exhibits would potentially draw them there, particularly people who maybe never have gone or haven't gone in many years. What would it take to bring them to the DIA? What would they find to be entertaining? And so I would encourage, Salvatore responded very positively to that and said that they would like to do that. So I just want to ask that you kind of remind him and David that I think we can find a lot of great ideas out there by asking the residents what would bring them in. So
I think you're right.
So I just want to bring that to your attention. Thank you.
That's a good idea.
Okay, thank you for coming here, Ed, and we look forward to having you serve for the next couple years on the arts.
Yeah, and obviously my phone number's in the book.
Right.
So if anyone has any questions at any point over the time, I'm more than happy to come back. I didn't come when they were here because I didn't want to do the two things at the same time, but I'm available for anybody's needs. So if you have a problem with the DIA, let me know.
Thank you.
Okay.
Item number 9, department recommendations. And before we get onto that, I just want to recognize Kathy Smith, our new clerk. Congratulations on your appointment. We look forward in working. We look forward in working with you during your term here, and anything we can do to help out. It's a big challenge that you have ahead of you. So. Thank you. So item number 9 is department recommendations through Kathy Smith, our clerk, register of deeds, a contract through Great Lakes Geomatics, professional parcel ID assignment services. This is services. This contract goes through January 2019 in the amount of $200,000 for the register of deeds. Funding is available in the Register of Deeds Technology Fund. And if our clerk wants to come up and talk about this, that'd be great.
I am here for that. I was just asked to introduce the two presenters that we have here to talk about it. Martin Dunn and from Great Lakes Crossing. That's where I want to be. I'm sorry. Great Lakes
It does look like
Geomatics
that.
and Martin Dunn. You guys like to come up? Great Lakes Cross.
This renewal contract, the contract went out for proposal back in 2015, and it was through Carmela's administration along with Craig Jones. The RFP was put together with Pat Swick, who was the former deputy register, I believe, at Wayne County. Great Lakes Geomatics gives us a little history of our company. We've been in, this is our 31st year in business. We started in 1987 across the street in the Macomb Muse building. In 1991, we were purchased by Medco Services. In 1998, I purchased some of the stock. And in 2010, when things got bad, we created Great Lakes Geomatics and purchased the land surveying assets along with the laser scanning assets of Medco Services. We're a small company. We have 10 employees, including myself. We recently moved to 76 South Main Street, right across the street. We're in the process of remodeling that building. All of our employees are Macomb County residents. The T-PIN project was created as a parcel identifier for parcels. Other counties such as Wayne County and Oakland County, they have a track index system. And as a surveyor researching properties and trying to find easements and encumbrances on properties, it's much easier and more efficient to be able to search parcels and encumbrances on them. And what we're doing in Macomb, we finally started. We've never had that before. It's always been a grantor-grantee system, and it's very cumbersome in trying to track the history of transactions within a particular parcel. And after we were awarded the contract, I hired Steve Corbett, and Steve is a former Macomb County employee. He has experience with, he worked with Ted Wabi for quite a few years in the treasurer's office, worked at the planning department, and then I think the last was at the equalization department. And all of Steve's experience gives us the expertise to do what we're doing with the parcel identification number. He's familiar with the county GIS, and what we're also doing along with this is we're checking the accuracy of the descriptions in the documents and verifying them on the GIS, making sure that the parcel that was in the transaction also matches what's in the county GIS. So we now have a checking point which we never had before. I guess I'm open for any questions.
Okay, I've quite a few commissioners have questions. First on the list is Commissioner Carabelli.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Did you first say that you helped put the RFP together for this?
My expertise, we met with the register, we met with Craig Jones and Pat Swick and other people from outside Great Lakes Geomatics when to define what the process for putting together the parcel identification RFP.
Okay.
I am also the Macomb County Surveyor representative, so
I know,
I was
this is
working
where
as part of
I'm
that team.
struggling. And you
Sure.
also have a contract with us for the little badges all over it. What do you call them?
Yeah, the remonumentation program.
You have a contract with the county for that, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And as a contract with the county for that, you're hired by the county to hire the companies to do the remonumentation, and you've also hired your own company, as one of the companies to do the remonumentation, correct?
Yes.
Okay. This is where I struggle. You just said that you helped put the RFP together, and now I'm really confused that you're a vendor who was hired to hire outside companies. You hired yourself and you hired somebody else for that one program. Now you're saying because you do this work, you help put an RFP together that you just so happen to be the one that's being recommended to get this work. I have a problem with this. No disrespect to you.
Okay.
It's a process that's in place, and it ain't flying with me today, okay?
Okay.
So no disrespect.
Sure.
I look at this, and I'm trying to understand that I can go online, and I have online, and I went into the GIS, and I can look up a parcel in Macomb County, and it can pull up that parcel ID number. I can search for by parcel ID number. And then from there, I can pull up the tax records, and it shows me who's bought, who's sold, who's done all this. What are you doing different that we already have on there right now that people, if they're doing a new split, they have to hire a land survey, and they have to have title insurance that
Sure.
they pay, right? So
Yes.
they pay for a surveyor, and they pay insurance to make sure that surveyor's doing it right, yet we're putting another layer on it to double check it to make sure it's right? You need to explain this to me.
Well, I'd like to have Steve Corbett explain that to you. He's the one that is the project manager of the project, and he can explain that to you.
All due respect, I'd rather not have him explain. I want you to help me explain it. Explain it to me because you helped put an RFP together.
Okay.
So explain to me, I don't want anybody else, I want you to explain to me, you helped put an RFP together, and tell me why we have to do this.
Well, in searching properties, as a matter of fact, we just completed a project for the Michigan Department of Transportation at the Gordie Howe International Bridge, where we went and we were to determine the current ownership of all the railroad parcels that were within the service plaza. And we were able to go in through Wayne County with their track index, we can go back into that particular private claim and follow and track all the transactions that were completed up until today, till the time that we were searching it. In Macomb County, you have a name, a grantor and a grantee. And if you search that name, you'll get a lot of different, the transactions of any transactions with that particular deed or quitclaim deed. And what this parcel identifying number does is it is exclusive to that particular parcel. And any transaction that happens again is related to that number, and that's the parcel ID number.
And every piece of property has a parcel ID number.
Yes.
Okay, I'm talking about Macomb County.
Well, but what I'm saying is that if you could go in and let's say that you wanted to search any encumbrances such as Detroit Edison or the county or the city and easements, you lose track of that. And through this parcel identification process from now on, that number in any transaction is going to be connected to that particular
I'm fully
parcel.
aware of it because I just did that process. I just went on RGIS, then I went to the state process to look up a drain to see who owned it originally.
Okay.
Okay, so we didn't have to have a check process, and you're saying that this $200,000 for a year is a check process to make sure that these numbers are right. Again, these numbers are there. People hire, they pay for title insurance. The property, if it's new, is getting surveyed. They have insurance to make sure they're doing everything correct. I'm, number one, not understanding why we need to have this, number one.
Okay.
Number two, how as a current contractor for the county, you're able to help put an RFP, bid on it, and receive it. And as I go through the process, and Madam Clerk, this is no reflection on you. I've had this issue when this came up once before, okay? So with that said, as I look at this, the contract routing review that's all in your package has not been followed properly. So it did not go to the executive's office, it did not go through finance, and I think Corporation Counsel is even supposed to be on there. I'm looking at it right here.
We don't use that sheet anymore. They just included it because they didn't
Oh.
know they were doing it, so it's all there.
Okay, well, the other sheet wasn't filled out, so I stand corrected on that. Again, this doesn't show that I'm doing my job if I approve this contract. No disrespect. That's all I have for right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Leonetti.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And looking at the contract, it looks like it's about a 3-year contract, maybe like 2 years and 7 months. In the course of what you're doing, is part of your work under this contract going back and taking a look at parcels and putting them onto this system? And is part of your work in going forward, like identifying under new transactions? I guess I'd like to know a little bit about, I mean, in other words, are we going to be back here in about 2.5 years with another renewed contract, or is this something that's going to be accomplished under the terms of this contract in identifying all the parcels?
No, it's a continuous, because there's always transactions going on
Okay.
every day, and that's what we're doing. Is we started in 2015, and that's, you have to start somewhere, and then we're our goal is to go back, you know, and hopefully through, you know, technology, and as technology evolves, there'll be a faster system where we'll be able to go back and get all the way back to hopefully the original patents. Now, that's what they have in Wayne County. Their track index goes all the way back to the original sale, or the original patent of the sections and the private claims.
And in Wayne County, how long did it take them to get to that point where their system went all the way back? I guess just looking forward, how many more years do we think we're going to have with you folks getting us to that point?
Well, what it is, in Wayne County, I think it was in 1912, they started their track index and started going forward. And then they also went backwards and then went to the
You mean in
original
2012,
patents.
not 1912?
1912.
1912.
Yeah,
So they've been
1912.
doing. Okay, so they've been doing it for over 100 years.
Exactly.
Okay, and we've done it differently from its inception?
Well, what we're doing now is we're starting to go forward. We're creating that track index from today, so that, you know, any parcels that the transactions are started in it, you have to start somewhere, and that's
Sure.
what we're doing. And the goal is to be able to go at some time to go back and eventually get back to the original patent.
Well, then I guess getting back to my original question, the $200,000 that we're going to give you for the next 2.5, 3 years, that includes obviously transactions that are ongoing.
Yes.
Okay. How much of that includes working our way back now? If you can break it down, you know what I mean, if you know.
Well, almost 100% of it's going now to going forward.
Okay.
There's just that many transactions, and keep going.
Does the other gentleman maybe, are you able to answer that question a little bit better than him? Yeah. Okay. Why don't you come on and help? Yeah.
Hello, my name is Steve Corbett. I'm an employee for Great Lakes Geomatics with Marty. He asked me to come on to the parcel identification project 3 years ago when it was first approved. And real quick, how it works is what we're doing is we're matching legal descriptions on recorded documents with the parcel ID numbers. Okay, and just like earlier when Derek Smith said how large this county is with the counties they have, the same thing applies for the number of documents that get recorded here in Macomb County. It's an enormous amount of documents, as I'm sure Clerk Smith will find out, that this is a very active community and county in that regards. But we began the program in 2015, and there was well over 115,000 documents that needed to be verified, which meant reading the legal description and attaching its 10-digit identification number so that they could be identified together permanently going forward. 2015 is complete. I'm currently working in 2016 documents, and we also have an employee working on 2014. So we are going in both directions. We're trying to go forward as much as we can, and we're trying to go backward as much as we can. And it all just comes down to the amount of manpower and time that we have to keep up with the documents. There's quite a large amount.
Okay. And I looked at the contract. The contract is just for the term. We're not saying you have to get us to 2001 backwards and you have to keep going forward. Nothing in the contract that I looked at puts any kind of...
This is the beginning steps of creating the track index. Like we talked about how Oakland County and Wayne County did it. They did it all at one time with a large amount of money and a large amount of manpower. In Macomb County, we're at the very beginning stages of beginning to identify and attach all that information.
Okay. Going forward, once you get that program in place, is it conceivable that you'll have systems? I know your colleague talked about better technology and stuff like that. That it could be done. You know how it is with technology; it can be done cheaper and with less people, and just as efficient and as accurate. Is that a possible thing that we could see when we see the next contract come up?
Yeah, it's a learning curve. As it's a brand new program, so the more we're doing it, the faster we're getting. The learning curve is getting faster, and it really all comes down to the amount of man time that Macomb County can supply and GLG can supply. It's just the number of people and documents trying to keep up with the enormous amount that get recorded every single day. So we are trying to keep up with it and going forward.
Okay.
And the learning curve is getting faster all the time.
Okay, thank you. One last thing, I do want to congratulate our new interim clerk, Kathy Smith. I know when we were talking before about the previous clerk, you know, there was talk about who we would, when we were thinking about removing her, you know, who we had in mind. And I know a lot of you heard me mention Kathy Smith, Kathy Smith, Kathy Smith. Well, our judges in their infinite wisdom made the right choice. So congratulations, Kathy. I'm glad you're on board. And I'll tell you, you have nobody better that can clean up the mess that we had for the last year and a half. She's the perfect person to do it. Thanks again. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Drollet. Commissioner Drollet.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Commissioner Leonetti asked a couple of my questions, but I'm not a legal document expert or a land transfer expert or anything like that. But did I hear you correctly that you're matching the parcel identification number to the legal descriptions? Is that mostly what it is?
Correct.
So right now, the parcel identification numbers are not matched to a legal description?
They're not verified, not completely matched in a true track index. No, not like Wayne and Oakland County have.
So
they're
how does
matched
it
through grantee grantor names, and the problem, the concern with that is when they're recorded, whether their name is spelled, for example, Steve or Steven, or with a middle initial D or no D. So it makes it cumbersome to search. And let's just say you use the name Smith, for example. If you were to search that, you'd get an enormous amount of results. So what we're trying to do is get to the result faster and more accurately by using the number rather than the current name system.
So who would be looking for the name Smith, for example, and see all these results? What kind of person? And what kind of
Anybody
situation?
from the public that wants to search, like if you're going to verify who bought a drain or a parcel in your neighborhood or a house that you want to buy, or even the, as he mentioned, when you're closing and the whole process of the surveyors and all that insurance, those people use these search data information at Macomb County also.
So I've always used the parcel ID number for that sort of stuff, and I've never like searched for Smith. I just look up the parcel ID number.
Can I do a quick survey and sample? How many of you know your parcel identification number where you live?
Off the top of our head, or we can look it up? I can look it up.
Do you know them right now? I mean,
yeah, I know.
well,
I know how to find it.
Being able to use that makes it a lot quicker service. It's just it's a way to attach data faster and more accurately.
And so what kind of problems have we been having because we don't have this fine tune? So, you know, I haven't heard people contacting me at least, and maybe they contact the clerk's office, but we haven't got a lot of information out of there in the last period of time. But you know, people calling and saying, you know, my parcel ID number is all messed up and nobody knows who owned it or what goes through. I mean, what kind of problems are people experiencing?
The creation of the parcel identification number actually comes from the land file division of the treasurer's office where I worked for 18 years. We're not actually creating those.
Right, I know there's parcel ID numbers.
Okay. So if there's a mistake with them, that's a completely different issue. We're trying to attach the data in the clerk's office between the parcel identification number and the legal description so that they can be searched in that way more accurately and quickly.
And so when that doesn't happen, what bad thing has happened?
You don't get the results that you're looking for. You could get hundreds of numbers and legals and documents that aren't what you're looking for.
Okay.
You get results not what you're looking for.
I guess I'm just hoping for an example of Jane Citizen or Joe Citizen who wants a piece of information and can't find it because this hasn't happened. You know, what kind of results would they be looking for?
You could get the history. I was going to say maybe Mark's be better on the history.
Yeah, I think, you know, as a surveyor and in searching properties, there's times when, you know, a developer buys a piece of property and at a later date they find out that there's an easement, you know, in the area that they were planning on putting their development. And what this, the parcel ID number is any transaction from here forward identifies that, and that transaction would be included and it would be part of the research for that particular ID number.
So it's sort of like you're tying a wider array of information more tightly to the parcel ID number.
That's
than
correct.
that currently exists.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
I've had time when I worked for Anderson, Exeter Western back in the 70s and I did research. you know, trying to find easements on properties, it was almost impossible because with the grantor grantee index. You know, people would die and you know, it'd be a different name, and you would lose that, you know, the sequence of events of what happened.
Okay. That helps me. Thank you.
Thank you. I have 4 other speakers on this. Commissioner Romano. I'm sorry, I thought you already spoke. Commissioner Lucido, I apologize.
I have a couple of questions. Did this in any way go out to bid to any other?
This is a renewal of a contract that's already existing.
I understand, but does it automatically renew, or someone explained to me, every time a contract is up, does it go out to bid, or does it just automatically renew?
Certain contracts are spelled out that you can have a 1 or 2 year extension. This one has terminated, and that's the questions I'm going to ask. Great question, because that's what I hit the button to talk about.
Right.
But you are correct. This should go out for bid, and that's where I'm going to ask who else bid on this.
Okay, that's what I'm asking, and then it wasn't you, Kathy, it was Kathy Brower that did this. I mean, personally, I would like to see it go out to bid if it hasn't already, and I would like to have your approval on it, because you are our new clerk, and have your opinion on it, because this is a new contract that would be dating from when you are in charge. Also, you said you are a small firm. Are you unionized in any way? No? Okay, just a question I had out of where it said relationship of parties, and it was interesting to me, some of the wording in there. So, okay, thank you. That's my opinion. I'd like you to do the hiring, and I would like to see it go out for bid. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Romano.
Thank you, Chair. Ms. Lucido was so good, she asked my question. Thank you.
Very good. Commissioner Kleinfeld.
Thank you, Chair. Okay. I just vaguely remember a couple of years ago, I remember being confused as to whether or not we had an employee in front of us or somebody working for somebody else. I remember that happening, and so she established it didn't go out for bids, but he said an RFP was created. So was the RFP created and then given to oneself?
No, that's a completely different issue. I think that got
Is it?
confused.
The RFP in 2015 went out on the Mitten site.
Oh, you didn't do a new RFP when you said that you were referring to 2015.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. My other question was, how important is it to go all the way back? Because I think when we approved this a couple of years ago, in my mind, I thought, we're going to create this system countywide. Once it's created, it's created. You know, and then maybe when a parcel changes hands, it's updated in the clerk's office or something, but I didn't see that this was something that would be for eternity. And now it indicates that after this 3 years, there will be another 3. There will always be another 3. And you indicated about going further and further back. Why is it important to go, what would be the reason to need to go back 100 years?
Well, I think the example of the railroad parcels in the city of Detroit, they went back into like around the Civil War era. And, you know, by Wayne County going back from 1912 and entering all of the transactions back to that time, we were able to track those railroad parcels all the way up until today.
But why did you need to track them? Why did you need to know what happened before we were all born?
Well,
what's the relevance?
There's always issues of ownership, and there can be ownership by that when a sale had taken place, that not all of the owners signed off on that and were part of that transaction. So in some of the things that we were doing in the railroad, it was like there were estates, and there were like 16 different people that owned parts of those parcels. And that was, you know, important to find out, especially when they're building a bridge, who make sure that they have clear title to that property. And that's what the parcel identifier does. and going back to there. You'll be able to track all of those previous transactions.
I'm thinking, and I'm the worst with technology. Everybody here knows that. I struggle with technology. But in my mind, if I can go onto Google and type in an address and I can see the house, I can see it from this side, and I can see that at some point in our world, that the system is there. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah,
and titles are, when titles are transferred, at some point or another, it's determined this person holds the title, regardless of what happened 150 years ago. So if we need a company to keep on top of it on a yearly basis, I could understand that. I don't understand we need to do that, and we need to go back and back and back and back and back until my great-great-great-grandfather put a stake in the ground and said, this is mine.
Sure.
So
it may be a decision to only go back to like 40 years or a decision like that. I mean, we don't have to go all the way back, but going all the way back, then you're able to track that patent all the way, to today. And and that is important in some transactions, which, it was important to MDOT to do that.
okay, and I just guess for the rest of the commission, am I the only one that thought this is something that would have an eventual end date? So thank you.
I have Commissioner Chair Smith, first round.
Thanks. There are a lot of commissioners that are a little confused about, there's many different aspects of this that have people off, right? One of them is that you're the contractors kind of here asking us to sign your contract, which is not normal, right?
That's
And understandable in what's been going on in the clerk's office, in the loss of people that really understand what's going on there, to be able to, and you're new. I mean, you're in the court section. You don't know this, nor would we expect you to. Normally, I would say that this would be a Todd Schmidt or someone like that standing up in front of us, explaining exactly why we need this, why your company, why we're not going out for bid, maybe because there's no other company that does this. I'm just going to assume, and we'll get to that in a minute, I think, with Commissioner Carabelli. But I want to take a shot at one thing. I think there's one person in the room that might at least be able to explain the need for this from the clerk's office point. And I'm gonna let Crystal talk just for a second, because, I mean, out of this room, I don't think there's anybody here that has any more experience in the clerk's office, and I don't want to, override, the clerk, but for us to understand, I think it might help if she actually gives a quick overview of this, if you don't mind, Crystal. What's that, Don? Do you have a point of information on this? Because I would like to hear it from somebody who's been in that office that understands, because I don't understand.
A point over the whole question, if it didn't follow policy, then no matter how good it is, if it didn't follow the procedure.
Don, here's my point. There are two issues here, I think. One of them is, do we understand what the need for this? And that's separate from, are we going with a bid? Well, I'm going to say at least separate these two issues. Did this go to bid right? Did this, that? And that'll come up with Commissioner Carabelli. I just want to talk to the necessity of it.
Okay, when you search your property in Macomb County records, the way it had been indexed was by name. So if you look up the house you own, you have to find out who you bought it from. And then you look up that person's name and you see who they bought it from. And then you have to look up their name and find out who they bought it from. And that's the only way to find out who owned it. With the parcel ID, you look that up. Once it becomes linked with that property, you put that in and it shows you the chain of title. I know you can Google the address and see it, but that's not verified. The Macomb County records are the actual records, and that has never existed. And right, I just lost my right, no, and that's what, yeah, so that's why you pay the entitle insurance people, and it takes them a lot to go through. And then several years ago, they didn't even index the wives' names. So if you owned property with your husband, your name never even showed up there. So there were different things, and how they mentioned how the names are indexed differently. You might not even find yours if they even had a typo in your name index wrong. So there are a lot of reasons why Macomb County decided to go ahead with this, including the neighboring counties had one already, and like he said, that dated way back, so you always had that chain of title there.
Okay, makes sense. So go back to.
Why? I mean, oh. Oh, yeah. I mean, that's,
Point
you
of
have to.
information, there is reasons to know, and I'll answer that. There's reasons to know who owned property a long time ago in case there was contaminants on that property, that they're held liable. And that they purposely, a factory had a spill and there's bad, zings on it.
Well,
Anything with the word zing at the end.
And I'm not
at the end of
like
the
a
day,
real
that's why,
estate,
for
but-
accountability purposes. But that is not residential property. That would be for a commercial piece of property. That's why you would need to know who owned it 100 years
But like
ago.
your title insurance verifies you have a clean title, so that the transfers of ownership was always legal, so that just makes that whole system easier too, so. But you really have to, I think they estimate it takes about 30 years to have, to get this in place. After 30 years, you can consider it pretty accurate, because most of the property has probably been transferred over that time period. So the sooner you start it, the sooner you get there. But the longer you wait, the more you're just like we have been. Yeah, and I know, I mean, when I was in the office, we talked about eventually, this could be a process that the staff could eventually be trained to do, but starting out, it was a lot more work and we didn't have the manpower. So that was the goal, to transfer over to it being part of the recording process. Yeah.
Yeah, and this could eventually become part of the county process where, they don't need an outside contractor to do this.
Okay, next on the list, Commissioner Carabelli and Lucido, last two speakers. Go ahead. Okay, motion on the floor to deny. Is there support for that? Support by Commissioner Lucido. Okay.
First of all, I would like to ask Corporation Counsel, who's here in the room, to take a look at this, to make sure that when this does come back, if it comes back to us, that if it would be appropriate for a vendor running his own RFP and being involved in a process who as a vendor, has hired himself as a contractor. And he was hired in a different aspect, and he's holding different contracts throughout the county. So I would like that done by Corporation Counsel. The second part is I'm asking for denial on this is because the contractor is determining how far we should be going back. A contractor is telling us, this is how far we should research back, or whatever year he picks, and that's what he's saying because that's his contract. He is speaking wholeheartedly on his behalf, and I don't begrudge him, but I think this is wrong, and it's not our due diligence as watching the taxpayers' dollars. And I think more time needs to go into the new clerk to take a look at this if it comes back to us. Thank you.
Okay, so there's a motion on the floor. Seeing no speakers do we have any speakers on the motion to deny on the floor? Seeing no speakers, please vote.
Vote is for.
Motion to deny, a yes vote is to deny, a no vote will not deny, and go back to the main agenda item. Welcome.
Point of order, so that would be with giving our new clerk direction to know that we will see it back, but once we have all of this information. So it's not a flat out.
Correct.
Thank you.
Whole process. And it passes 12-0, and hopefully we'll get through this. We'll get this figured out. Martin, thank you for
Okay,
coming here
thank you.
today.
Mr. Chair, can I just ask a quick question while the clerk is here and we have this issue? Will the clerk be getting a register of deeds, and will she be getting a deputy? Because this is a register of deeds question.
Yes, there was a couple people that had sent in information to me that I haven't had a chance to talk to yet. This is really only my second day here, but I absolutely think there needs to be someone there.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, with that, we'll go into item number 10, closed session. We need a motion to go into closed session for pending litigation. Moved by Carabelli, supported by Brown. Please
Kimberly, do you
vote.
have something?
Go ahead, very briefly. Thank you. And please vote. Do we all vote for that, Mike, to go into executive session? Laura's ready. Okay, we are back into regular session. Item number 11, new business. Commissioner Leonetti, you have new business?
Yeah, thanks. So the gentleman that was up here talking with the clerk, I had a lot of problems with the contract. I don't know who drafted the contract or if you had a chance to review the contract, but it seems to me the problem I had with it was $200,000. It was for like some 2.5 years. It wasn't quite 3 years. It ended in January 31st of 2021. And there just was no, it's just $200,000 and we're going to do this work. It wasn't specific enough in terms of what their goal was. I get that ongoing transactions are going to continue to monitor that, but what's that, how much is that worth? Well, I don't, that's why I guess it should go out to bid or whatever. I understand the necessity of doing what they're doing. I do get that. But the problem is I don't know if we're getting the right bang for our buck in what they're doing. And I'm not even clear what they're doing in terms of, I've asked him, I go, well, are you going back? Are you going forward? He's like, a little bit of both, you know? So.
I listened to the whole discussion, and there's a whole bunch of issues swirling around. One is the propriety of a vendor helping to prepare the RFP and then bidding on that RFP and then being awarded the RFP. The second issue is propriety of a county vendor, a contractor, being hired to select a successful bidder and then selecting themselves. And then, you know, is this a smart thing to do? Your concern. When we do contract reviews in my office, we pass on what's a very limited legal sufficiency. Is this a contract? Does it meet all the elements to be a contract? We very, very carefully stay out of judging, is it a proper thing to do, a smart thing to do, a dumb thing to do, a great thing, or otherwise. My department does not run the other departments. There's good news and good news on the other two issues. Good news for me is I'm going to be out of the country most of next week, so I won't be around to do the legal opinion. The better news is Frank Creasha will be doing it. I'll assign it to him. And in no doubt in my mind, Frank is the finest government real estate attorney in the state of Michigan. There is no one who knows this better than him. And I'll sign this over to him. And he'll get to the bottom of it for you on your concerns.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate you.
New business, Commissioner Kleinfeld.
Thank you, Chair. When we started the board rules, we had all the intention in the world of bringing it back at the next meeting and then the next government ops meeting and the next finance meeting. There's a lot happening, and I don't know if you noticed the last couple of months we've had some meetings that have gone like 4 hours, and there was just not a good time to put it on. And next week I'm well, at the end of the month I'm going to be going to Alaska, so I'm not going to be there for that meeting. And now we're into June, and this is an election year, and these are supposed to take place after the elections. So we're now just going to be 6 months away from that. So I'm thinking, I hate to go through all this trouble and have to turn around and do it again in 6 months. And we don't seem to be finding a good time to do it, so I just thought maybe we should just go ahead and wait until the first of the year. You know, I'll get everybody's thoughts on that. I do want to say, I know that people were irritated about going through it. That's exactly what we used to do in committee. That's what committee was supposed to be. That's where you hashed everything out. And then you went to full board and you had your final votes. And it wasn't until we went to 13 at the table that committee meetings became more like board meetings. And we stopped really hashing things out. So I like the full board being at committees, but we've lost the concept of what it was that we used to do. So I just want board members to remember, these are committee meetings. These are the meetings that we're supposed to be going through the nuts and bolts of what our job is, and that particular job only has to be done once every 2 years. But if everybody agrees, maybe that's a good idea. I'll get, you know, if anybody has any opinions, I'll get with Chair Smith and, you know, we'll figure it out. But I think if we're only 6 months away, maybe we should consider that. Thank you.
New business, Chair Smith, you want to speak?
Thanks. We'll talk about that. I think you might be on track with that, unless there are any board rules that are imminently, you know, wrong. And I don't think any of them were. Everything just seemed like kind of little tweaks to the better, yes. So my new business has to do with yesterday's tour. It was fantastic. I tell you, it was a very good learning experience to see what really goes on at one of those pump stations and what they're doing and what their plans are and what Candace Miller has done at that department is really worthwhile and eye-opening. I know they're thinking about we're thinking about doing it again, maybe on a yearly or 6-month basis, because there are different sites to visit, and they're all interesting in their own way. So I want to say thank you to her and to everybody that showed up for that. That was very informative, like I say, and I'm telling you, it's one of those things where you don't really understand it until you see it, and it's immense, what goes on underground after you've made the flush. It's unbelievable. Thank you.
Any other new business? New business? Seeing none. Public participation. No one from the public. Need a motion for adjournment. Moved by Romano, supported by Lucido. Please vote to adjourn.